This is Dan Dix here, reporting for Press for Truth, and as you can tell by the title of this video, today we're going to be talking about the Nord Stream pipeline false flag and how this is actually a war on Germany. Now, if you turn on your TVs today, I'm sure all you're going to hear is this idea that the Russians carried this out on themselves, which is an absolutely ludicrous notion which we're going to completely debunk today. Now, this should come as no surprise to you if you've been paying any attention to Press for Truth, because 9 months ago, back in January, I put out this, talk of a Russian false flag is actually a false flag on Russia. In this video, Dan Dix of Press for Truth explains that the real false flag here is the notion that the Russians are going to carry out a false flag, and it's all being perpetuated by NATO and the Biden administration in an effort to gain more control both over the region and also at home. And sure enough, here we are. So today we're going to look at this. The war on Germany just entered its hot phase, not Ukraine. And these are the facts related to the sabotage attack on the Nord Stream pipelines that we're going to look at. And in case you didn't know, guys, it was only, I think, 6 or 7 months ago, back in February of 2022, that Biden said if Russia invades, they're going to put a stop to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And when a reporter asked, how are you going to do that? He just said, don't worry about it. We're going to make it happen. So listen to this insane man
Let
here.
me answer the first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
Okay, how are you going to do that?
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will. I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Wow. If Russia invades, we will end the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Reporter asked, how are you going to do that? Especially since it's in Germany's control. I promise you, we will do that. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Now, a former Pentagon advisor is saying that the U.S. likely attacked Nord Stream pipelines in order to isolate Germany. A former Pentagon advisor says the most likely culprits behind the Nord Stream pipeline blasts are the United States and Britain, and that the attack was carried out to prevent Germany from bailing on the war in Ukraine. And it's not just NATO and U.S. in particular that we're going to be taking a look at, but we're also going to look at who else profits from pipeline terror, guys. And just when you think things couldn't be getting any crazier, we now see that Zelensky just applied to join NATO. We're taking our decisive step by signing Ukraine's application for accelerated ascension to NATO, addressed by President Vladimir Zelensky. Ukrainians and all our friends and allies, de facto allies. He's basically saying, like, we're already pretty much a part of NATO by saying de facto allies. Today, here in Kyiv, in the heart of our country, we are taking a decisive step for the security of the entire community of free nations. And guess what, guys? On the same day that Zelensky declared, applied, I should say, to join NATO, Biden announced that they would protect every inch of NATO territory, pointing his finger in the face of Vladimir Putin in this address. Check it out.
America is fully prepared with our NATO allies to defend every single inch of NATO territory. Every single inch. So, Mr. Putin, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Every inch.
That's a pretty blatant threat, ladies and gentlemen. So the drums of war are certainly beating, and things are escalating at an accelerating rate. So we're going to talk about all of that and much more in today's video, guys. But really quickly, just before we do, I'd ask that you check me out here at pressfortruth.ca/donate if you do appreciate my efforts to bring you this info. I really do need your help financially moving forward. Here you can do a one-time donation with PayPal. You can contribute Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies by clicking here. You can click on this banner here, Subscribe Star. It's a really good Patreon alternative because I have been kicked off of Patreon. Here you can sign up for another way of contributing on a monthly recurring contribution just by clicking there. You can also send an e-transfer to dan@pressfortruth.ca. Thank you so much to everybody who does do that. And if you like to keep things old school, guys, you can certainly send stuff to my P.O. box. Links for all of this are located in the description below. Again, thank you so much to everyone out there who takes the time to support my efforts financially here at Press for Truth. All right, guys, here it is. Footage from the site of a gas leak on the underwater section of the Nord Stream. The video was published by the Danish military. Earlier, the Kremlin said that it was most likely about sabotage, and the same opinion was expressed in the German government. So let's take a look at this. For decades now, the U.S. has opposed European projects to receive energy from Russia. It wants Europe to buy more expensive oil and gas. And let's take a look at the source here. This is coming directly from WikiLeaks, a decade of Russia versus U.S. gas wars in Europe, and there is the document proving that. Let's continue. This is an interview here with Condoleezza Rice. If you want to change the structure of energy dependence, this is, again, more proof that this goes back like, nearly a decade, even more, actually. You want to depend more on the North American energy platform to have pipelines that don't go through Ukraine and Russia. Let's listen to it from the horse's mouth herself. This is, again, Condoleezza Rice.
And, I also understand that one of the complications is the Europeans, who are very dependent on the Russians for energy supply and business relationships. But they also need to recognize that if Putin is not stopped now, we could find ourselves in a real conflict with Russia down the road.
Well, actually, let me jump in right there. Germany, arguably the strongest power in Europe, at least economically. Right. There's been criticism that Angela Merkel and others haven't been aggressive enough. What do you think of that? Do you think Germany's been as aggressive as they should be?
I'm quite an admirer of Chancellor Merkel, and I heard her statement when she was with President Obama in Washington. I thought it was a very good statement.
Listen here.
But now we need to have tougher sanctions, and I'm afraid at some point this is going to probably have to involve oil and gas. The Russian economy is vulnerable. 80% of Russian exports are in oil, gas, and minerals. People say, well, the Europeans will run out of energy. Well, the Russians will run out of cash before the Europeans run out of energy. And I understand that it's uncomfortable to have an effect on business ties in this way. But this is one of the few instruments we have. Over the long run, you simply want to change the structure of energy dependence. You want to depend more on the North American energy platform, the tremendous bounty of oil and gas that we're finding in North America. You want to have pipelines that don't go through Ukraine and Russia. For years, we've tried to get the Europeans to be interested in different pipeline routes. It's time to do that.
This is it,
so
man. Like, absolute proof that this has been going on for a long, long, long time. Europe's and especially Germany's industry depends on cheap energy from Russia. Without it, Europe will be deindustrialized and they'll just go broke. The U.S. had threatened to disable the pipelines connecting Europe and Russia. And again, this comes down to this Joe Biden clip. Let's just listen to it one more time because it's quite revealing. And
first question
creepy.
First. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing.
They're warning that they're going to do it.
The border of Ukraine.
When she asks how, he's like, "Don't worry about that."
There will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that? Exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Just like that. I promise you, we will be able to do it. Currently, the U.S. is winning its war on Europe's, mainly Germany's, industries and its people. Yesterday's sabotage attack on the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines, which are supposed to bring Russia natural gas to Germany, means that the war on Germany has entered its hot phase. So the question remains, who done it? Russia has no motive to destroy the pipeline that it owns. These are valuable, long-term assets. And the gas that escaped there yesterday was on its own worth somewhere between $600 and $800 million, guys. A pipeline, mind you, that could be turned off and on again it was a leverage point for Russia that gave it some negotiating power. And that's a good point, too. If this was allegedly carried out by Russia, why would they blow up their own infrastructure when they literally have the valve to the tap that they could just shut it on and off at will? You know, it's unbelievable that people would think that this is actually the case. But this is, again, why you got to turn your TVs off, guys, and continue to tune in to Press for Truth. A destroyed pipeline gives Russia no leverage. This is truly elementary. One cannot spin that away. During the war in Ukraine, Russia has not stopped to deliver gas to Europe as contractually agreed. Instead, European countries, Poland, Ukraine, and Germany have blocked overland and subsea pipelines that brought gas to Germany. German people have protested against the U.S.-ordered shutdown of Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Nord Stream 1 was recently offline because Siemens was prevented by sanctions from maintaining its compressor turbines. And here's a link to the huge protests that were taking place there in Germany as thousands of people gathered in Germany against Olaf's policy and the explosion of energy and gas prices. They demand an end to the sanctions on Russia and the reopening of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The demonstrations also in German cities, but EU media censored them. And guess what? A day after these protests, the pipelines were sabotaged. Yesterday's attack on Nord Stream system is not unprecedented. This is a very, very interesting thread that deserves to be looked at as well. As we see here in 2015, the annual routine underwater survey of the Nord Stream 1 pipeline came across a remote-operated vehicle rigged with explosives right next to one of the lines in Swedish waters. The umbilical cable had been cut, and the drone's national origin was never disclosed. Now, back in June of this year, NATO conducted its annual Baltic military exercise in the Baltic Sea. This year's exercise had significant focus on using U.S. Navy unmanned underwater vehicles to clear sea mines. Where did the U.S. Navy conduct these exercises? Well, right next to the Danish island of Bornholm, the same island adjacent to the massive ruptures in the Nord Stream pipelines that occurred yesterday. Oh, I'm sure it's just all a remarkable coincidence, isn't it? The Swedish military successfully cleared this remote-operated vehicle rigged with explosives, and it goes on to explain all of that. To destroy a subsea pipeline requires more than just drone, activity delivered to, put out this charge. In fact, this is going to require a very sophisticated military operation, as we're going to look at now, that required exhaustive planning, possibly involving several actors, blew up 4 separate sections of the Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 gas pipelines this week in the shallow waters of the Danish Straits and the Baltic Sea near the island of Bornholm. Swedish seismologists estimated that the power of the explosions may have reached the equivalent of up to 700 kg of TNT. Both NS and NS2 near the strong currents around Bornholm, they're placed at the bottom of the sea at a depth of 60 meters, and they were built with steel reinforced concrete, able to withstand impact from aircraft carrier anchors, and are basically indestructible without serious explosive charges. So this operation, causing 2 leaks near Sweden and 2 near Denmark, would have to be carried out and modified by underwater drones. Every crime implies a motive. The Russian government wanted, at least up to the sabotage, to sell oil and natural gas to the EU. The notion that Russia intel would destroy pipelines is beyond ludicrous, these Gazprom pipelines. All they had to do was turn off the valves. The NS2 was not even operational based on a political decision from Berlin. The gas flow in NS was hampered by Western sanctions. Moreover, such an act would imply Moscow losing key strategic leverage over the EU. It just makes absolutely no sense. Diplomatic sources confirm that Berlin and Moscow were involved in a secret negotiation to solve both the NS and NS2 issues. So that obviously had to be stopped, no holds barred. Geopolitically, the entity that had the motive to halt the deal holds the antithema, a possible alliance in the horizon between Germany, Russia, and China. And I want to get back to this whodunit article, but before we do, let's take a quick look at this former Pentagon advisor saying that it was, the U.S. is the only ones who could carry this out. Retired U.S. Army Colonel Douglas McGregor made the comment during an appearance on the Judging Freedom podcast. He said a process of elimination rules out Germany because they are dependent on Nord Stream for their energy security, while it also served no benefit for Russia to have sabotaged its own infrastructure. Would the Russians destroy their own pipeline? 40% of Russians' gross national product or gross domestic product consists of foreign currency that comes into the country to purchase natural gas, oil, coal, and so forth. So the Russians did not do this. The notion that they did it, I think, is absurd, he said, referring to Polish MEP's Radoslaw, his infamous deleted tweet in which he wrote, "Thank you, USA," along with a picture of the pipelines being exploded. Who else might be involved? Well, the Poles apparently seem to be very enthusiastic about it. However, citing reports that more than 500 kilograms of TNT had been detected in both the explosions, the former Pentagon advisor suggested only the United States and the British Royal Navy had the capability to pull off this kind of attack. You have to look at who are the state actors that have the capability to do this, and that means the Royal Navy, the United States Navy Special Operations. I think that's pretty clear, he says. We know that thousands of pounds of TNT were used because these pipelines are enormously robust. You have several inches of concrete, yada yada, we've already gone over that. So he clearly sees this as being attack motivated. Behind this attack was to prevent Germany from bailing on the Ukraine war after Berlin began to give the impression that they were no longer going to go along with this proxy war in Ukraine. And that's an important point to note as well. I'm hesitant to say we know it must have been Washington. I can't say because we don't know that, but it's very clear that we have foreclosed Berlin's options. Berlin was drifting away from the alliance. Chancellor Olaf said, "I'm not sending any more equipment. I don't send any tanks." Now he's in a bind because the United States has simply robbed him of the option of bailing out. So this is, obviously from this former Pentagon advisor, it's clear to him what's going on here. But let's take a look at the possibility of an impartial investigation of such a monumental act of sabotage, coordinated by NATO, no less, is negotiable. Fragments of explosives and underwater drones used in this operation will certainly be found, but the evidence could be tampered with. Atlantis' fingers are already blaming Russia, and that leaves us with a plausible working hypothesis. Now listen to this, guys. The hypothesis is eminently sound, and it looks to be based on information from Russian intelligence sources. Of course, Moscow already had a pretty good idea of what happened. They got satellites and electronics monitoring this area 24/7. The hypothesis focuses on the Polish Navy and Special Forces as the physical perpetrators. This is quite plausible. The report offers very good internal details. Again, guys, links for all of this will be in the description below. American planning and technical support, and aid by the Danish and the Swedish militaries. So we're talking the Danes, the Swedes, the Poles, the Brits, and the Americans. Inevitably, considering this was very close to their territorial waters, even if it took place in international waters. The hypothesis perfectly ties in with the conversation with the top German intelligence source, who told the Cradle that the BND, the German intelligence, was furious because they weren't in the loop. Of course not. If the hypothesis is correct, this was a glaringly anti-German operation, carrying the potential of metastasizing into an intra-NATO war. The much-quoted NATO Article 5, an attack on us is an attack on all of us, obviously does not say anything about a NATO-on-NATO attack. After the pipeline's punctures, NATO issued a meek statement believing what was to be sabotaged will respond to any deliberate attack on its critical infrastructure. Meanwhile, NS and NS2, incidentally, are not part of NATO's infrastructure. The whole operation had to be approved by Americans and deployed under the divide and rule tactic. Americans, in this case, means the neoconservatives and the neoliberals running the government in Washington behind this senile teleprompter reader. Again, guys, I want to remind you that Zelensky has applied for NATO joining them, even though he says they've already pretty much de facto joined. On the very same day that Biden pointed his finger in the face of Putin, right there, saying every inch will be protected. Guys, this is shaping up to potentially be one of these triggering moments that could lead to further escalations of war, not just in Ukraine with Russia, but also because of the direct ties with Germany and specifically the European Union. So crazy stuff, guys, that I wanted to bring to your attention, but this is just the beginning of what we're about to see unfold. I want to point you to what I feel is coming down the pike as well. The next false flag will be a cyber attack on global supply chains. This is cyber Polygon exposed. I'll just skip to a brief synopsis here. In this video, Dan Dix of Press for Truth speaks with James Corbett of the Corbett Report about the upcoming cyber Polygon simulated event, how society is being conditioned for a real cyber attack to come, and most importantly, what you can do about it now to protect yourself and your family from this coming cyber catastrophe. And again, I do believe we are heading towards very troubling times indeed, guys, which is why I wanted to bring all of this to your attention. I know there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation going on out there in the mainstream outlets about who's responsible for this, but I think we've painted a pretty clear picture here that it absolutely makes zero sense that the Russians would do this to themselves, and it makes perfect sense when you ask key bono, who benefits ultimately. And it looks to be the U.S., the Poles, the Swedes, the Brits, NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization are the ones who pulled this off. Guys, please share this video. We have to get this information out there. We have to spread this information far and wide. If you do appreciate my efforts to do that, don't forget to check me out over here at pressfortruth.ca/donate. Again, here's where you can financially support my efforts. Thank you so much to everybody who has contributed to my efforts over the years to continuously bring you this information. I can't continue to do this work without you. So thank you for that. And that's all for today, my friends. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to click that thumbs up button and share this video with your friends and family. Subscribe to this channel wherever you happen to be watching this. If it's on Odyssey or BitChute or Bastion or Rumble, or wherever you happen to be, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And stay tuned for more video reports coming soon, my friends. This is Dan Dix reporting for Press for Truth. We all want truth. The truth will set you free.